Welcome to the Conjugate Nation podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 19. Look at us go. Coming off of last episode, we left off talking about specialty bars for the lower body and just a sort of, I think, pretty well-rounded conversation from what we use, why we use them, what we like, et cetera, et cetera. Actually had an interesting conversation with games level CrossFitter, just a text thread back and forth about I reached out to them. They posted a video up saying they found the Rogue Buffalo bar like a really challenging barbell, like harder than the safety squat. And I thought that was like a really interesting piece. So I kind of reached out to them, and then we kind of messaged a little bit back and forth. And I'm kind of keen to follow it up again and talk with them more about it, because I mean, that, from my opinion, that really shouldn't be the case. Like, the Buffalo bar, that bow bar should definitely is in general not a harder bar than a safety squat. But if you're finding that to be the case, I mean, what are the things that you're thinking about then? Like, from my perspective, having thought a bit about it, I mean, safety squat, you're talking about upper back, and that upper back leverage and where it wants to fail, similar to like what a front squat would feel like it's the upper back first, and that leads the low back into a forward hip hinge, and that's where you run into trouble on a safety squat. But with like Buffalo or a Buffalo or a bow, I feel that's generally a more mid back bar, and then from that mid back position, that leads the hips forward into where you run into trouble or struggle with that bar. Because neither bar, like the SS has some rotational force because of the camber of the arms. So it's got some rotational force, but it's still restricted more than a straight bar would be. But the bow bars, they have no rotational force. They've really just got that vertical drag. What do you guys, what comes to mind? Like for you guys, what are your thoughts?
So for us, it's right below the trap. You know, like you said, mid-back. Like the spinal erectors go into the low trap, like right in that area is where people tend to fail on that. What I like from that, and that's the beauty of the specialty bars, right? Like we're talking about, they expose weaknesses and they allow us to fix technique issues through feedback from the bar, or allowing our coaches to see where we break down or lose speed at, right? So we have a million different ways to do good morning variations. I can do good morning variations for low back, upper back, mid back. There's a lot of different exercises or special exercises that we can do for that. So that's where I will start really specifying mid back and bring the leverages out for mid back, which I find very common for CrossFit athletes, because most CrossFit athletes have really thick spinal erectors in the low back, you know, from the Olympic lift positions. And if you're one of those CrossFit athletes that have really thick spinal erectors in the low back, but you see them taper off hard when it gets up to the mid back, you're susceptible to issues like this and to other things too. But your spinal erector should look roughly even muscle density from top to bottom, all the way up. Okay. So, you know, a lot of these athletes you'll look at and you see them like dropping their mid back in that Buffalo bar. Then if you look at their actual physical build, a lot of times you'll see that low back being really well developed and not so much in mid or upper. But that's a great thing about these bars, is Jesse's 100% right. The safety squat bar should always be the hardest. If you are well balanced, perfectly balanced, the hardest bar for you will be the safety squat bar. For majority of people, safety squat bar will be the hardest bar. But, you know, for some people, it is going to be other bars. But the nice thing is, once you learn those bars, you know exactly what the problem for the athlete is, because you know where that bar puts extra stress.
Yeah, totally. And that's the thing that I always feel like listening to that, watching that video, and just be like, oh man, this is such a cool piece, because it's such a great opportunity. Like something that's, if that's the case, and like the discrepancy between a 1RM and a bow versus safety. I mean, if that number is too close, or the bow exceeds the safety, you're like, what you need to do next is pretty obvious and pretty specific for what's going to move the needle for that person. Yeah, super. I just thought it was a cool piece to follow up with, coming off the conversation we just had in the last episode.
Can I say a good exercise for that real quick? So there's an exercise that I hate to say I come up with exercises because there's somebody's probably maybe done, something somewhere, right? But one of the things that we came up with one of my athletes that was having a similar issue is we would take a safe, put them in a power rack, just put the bar 3 inches to 4 inches below where their lockout would be if they picked it all the way up for a squat. And then I did max band tension for, whatever rep scheme you want, 5s, 8s, 20s. I start with 20s, and then over time I work the heavier reps and just make them do a standing arched round back, just the upper portion. And I took a guy who, pulled 1,000-pound sumo deadlift in training. He was a 900-pound puller in competitions and stuff, but we were getting him stronger as time went on, and he ended up, hitting big weight in the gym. That was the biggest fault for him, is he really needed to wedge into that sumo, into that bar, get the slack out of the bar, and pulling his shoulders back an extra inch made a massive difference in his leverages and put it roughly close to 100 pounds on his deadlift. So going from that arch and bringing it back, he said that was like the hardest exercise he ever did that we've done. And it didn't. I mean, the bar moved that far. It didn't move that far at all. But it was just a vicious exercise, but hit exactly where we wanted to hit.
Chris,
Did you get a chance to watch it, Jesse? The lift? Did you get a chance to see the lift? I'm kind of wondering too.
because I was like, I'm pretty keen to see what that looks like, because sometimes it's
Totally.
a misuse. Like it's like in the wrong position. There's a simple fix to it. And that's a piece where I was like, I need to follow up, and like, I'd like to see video of it and just sort of see, but all things being equal, if proficiency lies on both bars, like it's interesting to see the weakness, but yeah, there's a proficiency question mark there for sure.
Yeah, I wonder if it's just, first time it was super awkward because it is a little bit unbalanced. As you were saying it, I've had lifters that have, gotten up to their 1 rep max barbell squat with the bow bar. It just feels more comfortable for some people, the thicker bar, especially the Buffalo Rogue one. They seem to do, not always exceed the back squat, but up close, much more than the safety squat bar for sure.
Oh, that's me as an athlete. But like I use the Mega Bow as a test piece. So Mega Bow will be the bar I hit the number with first. And then if I can hit it with a bow, like Mega Bow or bow, I'll follow that with a straight weight. But I know for me that a lot of the issue with that back squat is a rotational force and that upper back for the barbell. So that straight bar, I have always it's a real grind setting that T-spine and upper back position. And the bow, because it's got that drag on it versus I find it doesn't displace the weight out far enough to really make a difference. And I think I'd be a stronger mid back than upper back. So that, I've actually found those bars for me to generally be like the first time I get a weight, it's not uncommon for me to hit my, an all time on bow or Mega Bow, and then know that okay, I'm not far off of being able to hit that with a straight bar.
And some people do well on the Buffalo bar compared to a straight bar for the simple reason they have bad shoulders, and their shoulders hurt them bad, so that takes the pressure off. And the straight bar, sometimes they don't realize how much that straight bar is holding them back with how much discomfort they have in their shoulders. So that Buffalo bar takes a little bit of pressure off, and all of a sudden they do really good. So if I don't see a breakdown in the athlete's position or speed, but I see that Buffalo bar is better than majority people will be, then I start asking questions about their shoulders, and start taking a look at those, because sometimes it's just a actual physical problem with the athlete as well, that the bars sometimes allow them to work around pain or discomfort, which is important for us to know as a coach, and important for the athlete to realize how bad that shoulder issue is. They might not have thought it was that bad or holding them back that far, so they didn't put as much effort as they need to in the rehab. But this can be an indicator and something as a coach to point out to the athlete, say, hey, look, you think your shoulders are good enough to go. Clearly you're not doing enough work, because look at the difference in these two bars, and it should not be that different,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, pretty cool. I mean, the thing that get nerdy and excited about is just those conversations, right? There's always times I'm like, oh man, but why? And you want to see the lifts, and you want to compare the numbers, and want to know what that athlete's back looks like where that muscle mass is, how it's what, just like you said, Shane, the erectors from bottom, shorts to freaking top of the traps, Like,
Mhm.
what does that back look like? You know, it's really interesting, especially for someone who's got a good eye. There's all kinds of little details and
Yeah.
pieces like that you can sort of see with, especially with experienced athletes who have some thickness.
We should really get some pictures. It's easy to find. I have plenty of pictures of athletes with the good ones, but if we can find some pictures with the really thick and the low, which I've seen, teaching the CrossFit courses over the years, I've seen a ton of good CrossFit athletes come through and have really thick, low spinal erectors. And you see where the performance is, you know where it is, and you know where they're lacking from it. So even if they're not hurt, I know where they're suffering performance wise, but I also know where that injury is going to be when they do get hurt, if they don't ever have the injury. But it's kind of, when we're talking about specialty bars, and a lot of people probably think, oh, there's a podcast about bars. How exciting can that be? It actually is pretty exciting because these bars make it so a lower level coach can start to figure out what problems are. When you are limited in the equipment you have, like just a regular straight bar and certain basic lifts, it can make it the problem a little harder to find, and you need more experience because a lot of times there's multiple problems that can cause the same issue. But a lot of times the bars, when they expose an issue, um, it's usually one or two things. It's usually very limited on what those issues can be. And that is really nice because it makes it easy for beginning coaches to find the problems, to know what to fix. And then it teaches them to start to look for those faults and those problems in other apparatuses and other things. So I find it to be a great tool for new coaches and a great tool for coaches, period, but a great tool to learn the thought process required to be a good coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
an awesome point. And I would say that for me, that was one of the drivers into Conjugate. Like I really, enjoyed the science and reading the book of methods and, listening to the stuff with Louie and practicing, kind of knew it worked. And I got to see great coaches implement it with good athletes. But I can remember Abby Grove when she went to Westside. We worked with her in the Northwest a lot on HQ staff, and then she got the invite to Westside, and I didn't see her for like a year. And watching her come back and how she coached, you could just tell like she was so much more attuned to little small, acute movement patterns. Which when you're watching all these accessory lifts, the good morning, your hinging patterns, and these isolated back movements, you get to see some of these breakdowns in the kind of in the like micro portion of it, and then when you see in these big macro movements, you can dissect it better. That really was kind of a driving force into Conjugate. Like, oh, we can really like drive in here and fix some things. And obviously specialty bars expose it, metabolic duress and CrossFit workouts can expose it, max effort lifts can expose it. All those are opportunities to assess. And that to me was, from a coaching standpoint, a really big driver to the program.
It was actually cool to watch her process, actually, because I met Abby when we would go down and power to compete at Big Jesse's meets in Linwood. And then Big Jesse and I went and stayed with her, and when she was still with Jimmy Pacifico, went and stayed with them. And that was actually the first time, I think, Shane, that I came down and worked one-on-one with you.
Yeah.
It was at that first trip we were staying with Abby and Jimmy, and just watching her early in that process, because I think at that point she'd been there for a handful of months, and just like working her way through the books, like having Lou like help and explain stuff, and her figuring it out, and just like, I mean, that's one of those pieces that's just so. This it's just sad to know that time has passed with Lou being gone now, and just that education like that through Westside. I mean, it's just never going to be the same.
Yeah.
And
Abby was, I had the privilege to see her go through it in person. I wasn't there like every training session or anything. I wasn't like that, but I was at Westside often, so I would see her progress pretty quick. And you think, look at her CrossFit background before she went to the Westside. She was knowledgeable, well spoken, worked out hard. But it was no doubt after Westside that she changed as a coach and as an athlete. It breeds mental toughness, even when you take a mentally tough person, but you put them in a system that evolves even, more specific or farther. It just allows to bring out that part in them even more, because now she understands the reasons why she's going to be better, and she understands the reasons why she's a better coach, because there's these little details that she understands a little bit better. And, as a coach, obviously the more tools we have available. So Chris makes a great point, when you're looking at conditioning, someone's not conditioned, you start to see faults. Jesse's working with some fighters now. Well, everyone will tell you, they don't want to fight someone who has phenomenal conditioning, because if you can't take them out, you're in for a long, hard grind, But when people's conditioning is down, they start to default to inferior positions, what makes it harder for them to win. And that's whether it's a sport like fighting or, racing bikes or, lifting sport like CrossFit or powerlifting or Olympic lifting. Those fatigue states are a bad place to be. And a lot of powerlifters don't look at that, but powerlifters need to get really good conditioning. If you want a big deadlift and big total, you better have good conditioning. If not, you're susceptible to much higher rates of injury. What are you going to do? You're going to be fatigued in the last lift. What's your last lift? The deadlift. Well, it's a very common lift for people to get injured on, and most of them are in a fatigue state when they get to their third attempt, and that's why the injury rates start to go up. When you're not fatigued, you'll get a little bit better position. You'll hit all your points of performance. Your main lifts. If you're going to a max effort lift, well, when you have maximal pressure on you, that's when faults start to point out. Whether it's a breakdown in position or a loss in speed somewhere. Breakdown in position, loss in speed, fatigue, loss in position from fatigue. All those things tell you something about an athlete, and those are the things that we get to dissect and break apart. So the more tools we have, the better. And this is just one of those tools. But yeah, that was kind of a phenomenal time. It was nice, like I said, got to, meet Jesse and start working together. Abby was a nice person, liked having her at Westside. That was awesome. It was really cool because she bought in and went for it, which is what she needed to do her part. She did her part. And I think she got a lot of benefit out of her putting 100% effort into it.
She came out with a PhD for sure.
Yeah. So cool.
All of that also with the specialty bars there, Chris. Adam sent me some photos of the new setup at Fort Vancouver. Dude, three R3s and freaking 3 full gun racks of bars.
Yeah, the whole wall's taken up with specialty bars. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Man, it's really exciting. Like I was texting with them this morning about it. I'm super fired up. Like there's still only so many places that really, like, especially CrossFit, that have adapted that conjugate in that way, that run like a section of the gym as full conjugate. So it's like, it's pretty awesome.
That is cool.
Yeah, we're gonna be running class. We have been running classes already, and some have been busy. So yeah, we got a total of 4 racks over there, but yeah, the 3 are on that one side that we filled in. So yeah, man, it's and seeing all the specialty bars, because they were all in just like the stand up racks, so you don't get to really see them. Now they're all similar, obviously, to your gym, Jesse, which part of the idea. But yeah, it's a really cool, exciting time for sure.
Yeah, and you guys got the belt squat and hyper and freaking like
some of the road showroom awesome in there. You got the road lat pull down, got the Rhino, got the reverse hyper. Yeah, so it's
nice.
No excuses.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome,
that's
man.
Cool.
Okay, so specialty bars, upper body. Best place to start is multi-grip. In general, similar to the safety squat, that multi-grip would be the first upper body bar. Agreed?
Yep. So for me, I like Elite FTS is what we use, like the kind that we used at Westside. So of course I like that. Watson's, I think they're out of England. There's a company called Watson's. They make I love their bar. The only thing bad about it is it barely fits between the uprights and the bench. So so I suggest your handoff person pull it back in. It has these gussets that are like a triangle, and they sit a little weird in the uprights. But don't let that scare you away, because I really like their grips. Now, I usually use a medium or wide grip. The narrow grip is kind of, for me, a little off. But I'm sorry, I use the narrow and the medium on that one. And the Elite FTS one, I don't use a narrow. It's too narrow for me. It bothers my shoulders. I use the medium and wide grip on the Elite FTS one. And for most of the bars, you guys understand the multi-grip bars, or what they would call at Westside a football bar. The handles are at a 45-degree angle, roughly, give or take, depending on the company. But they're angled. They're not the straight or Swiss bars, okay? The multi-grip ones that are a football bar variation are on an angle. And originally they were called a football bar because they were designed for like high school collegiate football teams, for people who didn't know how to bench and weren't getting coached properly on the bench to not hurt their shoulders, okay? That's essentially where it came in at. So that was a design idea of the bar, and kind of why it was called a football bar. For us, the way I look at it is, I do like that grip to take pressure off my shoulders, but also hit my triceps pretty hard. So I find that I can work my triceps a little harder with that bar. And think of it again, it's like a factory worker. Repetitive motion injuries aren't just for factory workers, it's for athletes as well. So if every bar we do is the exact same angle, same position, we're wearing out and grooving in the same area in our joints. So just making a slight adjustment hits the muscles a little different, rotates the joint just a little different. And this keeps down the wear and tear of doing the exact same angle and stress all the time as well. Those bars that have them, they're straight. They also have a camber to them, which means you can go down deeper, obviously. And then the Swiss bar variations are the ones with the handles at a 90-degree angle. And there's a lot of companies making a lot of different ones. Elite has a wide variety, and I think Rogue has a pretty wide variety too, as far as the different angles and widths. At my gym, personally, I don't know how you guys are. I think we have 4 or 5 different kinds of multi-grip bars in our gym, to give you an idea. I probably have 10 to 12 of them total. So, we find them important enough for sure.
The multi is definitely the go-to. A wide selection is high value. I think there's a lot to talk about, actually, with the design and the shape of the bars themselves. There's a ton of stuff that gets overlooked, including some of the companies that are building them. The one thing for us is we're probably 40, 50 lifters, maxing out lifts twice a week. And then the CrossFit side uses it as well. So, on any given week, we could see 150 plus reps of 1 rep maxes through specialty bars. And with that sort of piece, there's a lot we've learned over the years. And the multis are probably the most extreme example of that, because there's a bunch of details that make a huge difference. Like the angle between Swiss and football is definitely a factor. Overlooked is the width of those handles. So if you take the Gen 1 Rogue multi and you measure the span between the power rings on a straight bar, you realize that the widest grip on that Gen 1 bar is still much narrower than the power ring. So even the widest grip on some of those multis can actually be quite a narrow grip overall, which means that when you come into those middle grips, now you're moving into was a very tight close grip position. And it can really, by the time you change the angle of the hands, the desire then is for the elbows to track closer to the body, which is fine if you're intentionally doing it or aware of it, but could also cause the athlete to dump that bar to the belly. And then also, even if it doesn't dump to the belly, cause rotation at the shoulder joint as they get low to make that range with the elbows close. And they'll have that shoulder rotate off the bench, which puts them in a vulnerable shoulder position. 2, because of that, also much weaker position to press out of the hole. So it's nice to have a variety of those bars that some have much wider grips. The new Rogue ones that have the adjustable handles offer a lot more variety. But then, I saw one when we were at Rogue's HQ a year or so ago, where they actually modified so the sleeves lock as well, because a float of a bushing sleeve versus a fixed sleeve is also a dramatic difference. So a bushing sleeve is unstable and will remain unstable no matter how much weight you put on it, because the plates can rotate, so that instability becomes a large factor. So we've got a old school 80s style football bar, which is what Westside has is the cutouts and the single bar section that's 2 inches between. And it's got bushing sleeves. And because of that, you're man, it's a hard bar. And it's pretty unstable. Personally, I prefer the fixed sleeve. I like that they don't rotate. I haven't seen it on the Canadian site, but I did see it at Rogue, where they've got a little Allen key screw that on their new multis actually locks the sleeve itself.
That's
so you
cool.
can choose to either allow it to rotate or not, which I think is a really great option. To be honest, I would probably have a tendency just to tighten it down and have it not rotate, because the instability of that bar isn't at all, in my opinion, the purpose of it. It's the positioning of the hands and the change from how what muscles you're using. The same as we would use a safety squat, right? So that sleeve fixed versus floating makes a big difference. And then the other 2 things that I think are really worth noting are, and most companies are making the adjustment now, is the width of the bar makes a dramatic difference, especially depending on the size of the athlete. So some of them are the old ones, or not old ones, but the new old ones. So like Gen 1 Rogue Multi, like that bar is 8 inches or more, like across. So most athletes, even if they get it in a good spot at the bottom, are going to touch high on their belly. And the range of motion is actually going to be substantially reduced unless you're willing to angle that bar, which just is a terrible choice because it exposes you to dumping it towards the head. So then you're getting this belly touch and a really reduced range of motion. And also too much handle. Like, I don't understand why those handles need to be any more than a standard dumbbell in length. And now a lot of those companies have gone to like that flat bar. I actually just saw Elite is doing like a thin, like I think Rogue calls it their like a C or something like that. It's like instead of having it be like 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch square tube, it's like maybe 3/8 plate or like flat bar that they use. So it's like it's thinned out the overall thickness, and I think that's a superior design. I think the smaller the width, I think is actually a much better multi because 100%. It maintains range of motion and makes it more stable. But I think then the last thing on that is the difference of a cutout versus a arc camber. So when you've got like Kabuki's like arc, so you've got it's just a global like arch to the bar. I think there's like a Nemesis out there that one company makes. The Cadillac is a Kabuki one, as Chris was saying. The thing about those is that the part that's kind of lame for a bench is that the wider you go, the deeper it gets. The narrower you go, the less it's like increasing your range of motion. And then also you got to drag, and then it also makes a bar unusable for other stuff. So I could set up a seal row with like a straight multi or a Elite FTS multi because it's straight across, so it doesn't want to flip the other direction. But you can't use one of those cambered. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the straight camber is, man, it's a great bar for like a seal row. It's like
I love those for a seal row or inverted row. Either one of those just have the extra range. I love that.
Yeah, it's so good, right? And it's like, and so because of that, I think those arc bars just aren't as good because it really, depending on your, like, you got a variation in the width that you've got, and you've got and then you can't use them for a whole bunch of things versus like those Elite ones that are just basically a cutout for the chest only, means that no matter how wide or how narrow you go, the depth or range of motion is exactly the same. And they can also be flipped upside down, because that's the other side too, is like when we've had athletes with shoulder injuries and they're beginning to bench again, one of the easiest things, instead of having to use a board, is that often that neutral grip or that Swiss bar grip is the least impact on the shoulder. So it's a great place for someone who's got shoulder issues. But you flip that Elite FTS bar upside down and you've got a 2-inch range of motion change. Like now you're like 2 inches plus. So you've shortened their range of motion by like, I mean, I don't think it's quite a 2 board, but it's like maybe a board and a half. And they don't have to have a board tucked under their shirt or one of those bench blocks clipped to a straight bar. So it's a great way to like adjust and use that bar for rehab and building back into like being able to bench straight again.
And you're going to have to use a board with that because you can't have a bench block because the way they're designed, you don't have anywhere to snap it in the middle anyway. So you're going to need an extra person. So that means if you have a handoff person and you have a person holding your board, you need 2 people to help, with that. So it is easier, like I said, to flip it upside down, which is really nice on those bars. I agree. If, I prefer the lock collars for majority of things. The one thing I do, like my Elite FTS ones have spinning collars, and I like those for like a JM press or skull crusher variations, things like that.
That's fair.
Or if I'm doing like a hammer curl variation. But outside of that, when it comes to like pressing, things like that, I prefer the lock collar on too. But that's a nice thing. People a lot of times don't think much of those bars. They think they're kind of a gimmick. Well, do you notice how many companies are making them? How many variations of those exist? They're not coming up with 40, 50 different variations because nobody likes those bars. They don't actually work, right? I think people keep trying them, and, like Jesse was saying, figure out what they like and don't like. Like, to me, Watson's, like, I like their handles are very short. My Elite FTS one has longer handles. It's my only kind of gripe about that one. but I have the first generation Rogue ones too, which are really wide. And what he's talking about is, you know, your chest up and your stomach up, and you come down. A lot of times that plate will hit the bottom and tilt the bar back. So if it's square, if you think if it touches, it wants to do this, right? So having a narrow one keeps that from happening. So like if Watson's did the plate on each side steel, that would be pretty sweet because their bar would be pretty narrow, you know, width wise. But that's one of the things I see a lot of people fail on is the forearm strength. So the hand wants to go forward or back because the wrist can't stabilize that position on those bars. So we use that bar whenever I see an athlete who maybe they've been gunning pretty heavy, they've been increasing their weights by a lot lately. I'll throw that bar in just to give them a little bit of break on their shoulders, and they cannot lift as much weight because, again, them stabilizing their forearm underneath that load is a limiting factor, so they can't bench as much weight as they would with a straight bar. So this automatically gets their nervous system back in check by not, you know, pushing them so hard, and different angle for the shoulder, so it gives them a little bit of a break. So, you know, if I want to go heavy the following week, I'm in a really good spot to hit some heavier straight weight lifts because I took care of their nervous system and kept it in check. And I also gave their shoulders a little bit of a break so they can feel nice and healthy before they go. So that's also a bar I like just to get people back to when they've been gunning a little hard for a little while to get them back to where they need to be.
Yeah, I think all that stuff's great. You know, I've used tons of science, you know, and changing different angles and, you know, preventing all these overuse patterns and helping out people that maybe got some shoulders. Those the bars are great for that, but it's just more fun, you know, too. You know, those bars are, how long do we lift? You know, we've been lifting, doing shit. I've been bench pressing more than I've been doing any other movement, you know, junior in high school. So just being able to, the psychological impact of just being able to attack different movements, and the multi-grip gives you a lot of different options. And just, yeah, just a fun lift. I think that, you know, if you're going to, you can find them if you just keep your eye out on Craigslist. Those things are out there. Facebook Marketplace, you know, just keep your eye out there. I just got an Elite FTS one for $200. It was in great shape. You know, just go, you know, keep your eye out there. Pretty cheap. You know, if you're going to be doing this stuff for a long time, you'll have a lot more fun. You'll obviously get better results, but even just that psychological, like, you know, just straight bar pressing all the time, you know, it just gets boring.
That's the bar I like to use the most, like Louis push-ups. I used a multi-grip,
nice.
whether it's a cambered or not. I can drop it so I can go deeper if my shoulders are feeling good. If they're not, I'll just go flat with them. But I absolutely love that for push-up variations for sure.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely athletes who are struggling with shoulder stuff or just a variation for push-ups. We use those all the time for push-ups.
Mm-hmm.
Like just set either, I mean, and the nice thing is be able to adjust, right? Like you can raise that off the floor as high as required for the athlete to be able to be successful. And yeah, they're great for push-ups.
Yeah, technique too for the wide grip. You know, people that have a hard time locking in shoulders, that wide grip position can be really good for, you know, teaching that back how to wedge. Like, yeah, there's lots of different technique tools you can use for it, and a relatively cheap bar.
Don't underestimate what Chris said about that bar helping you learn to pack your shoulders in, okay? Pulling the bar apart, using your lats off your chest, and learning how to articulate your shoulders in a bench press, pulling them back correctly is difficult for people to learn when they've never done it before. It usually takes a year or two for people to learn how to do this pretty well. And I found that specialty bars tend to be the easiest way for people to feel it. So, as an example, the grip that you use on the multi-grip bars is easier to tuck your shoulder blades together for a lot of people. I found for me when I'm teaching people and I can't get them to figure out how to use their lats in a bench press properly, the bow bar tends to work really well for that just because the hand angle's turned out a little bit and it's already putting your back in a little bit better position. And, you know, for us in powerlifting, the way I look at it is it's what transfers to that straight weight bench, okay? Like, how do I get that straight weight bench better? So, because I need you to feel your back, I need you to just feel it somewhere, anywhere. Once you feel it the first time, you can start searching for that feeling in other positions. So, it's easier to pick up on the bow bar. And if you get on the bow bar, you're going to soon afterwards get on a straight bar. But if you keep that person just on the straight bar and they're not getting it, they tend to get more and more frustrated, and it tends to take substantially longer to teach them how to utilize their back in a bench press. So these specialty bars really come in helpful in figuring out little nuances in technique.
And like Chris was saying, just like the enjoyment of it, like So if like, okay, like you like narrow is better than wider, in no world would I give away or sell my like Rogue Gen 1 multi.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, it's really narrow, it's really wide, so on and so forth. But I can't think of one athlete who didn't increase their 1RM on that Rogue Gen 1 multi and not PR a bench. Like it's for sure makes that difference, regardless of like the change of range of motion.
Jesse brings up a good point. I have a lot of equipment in my gym. I like equipment. I like variation. What you'll find is, yeah, well, I usually tend to have way too many bars. I probably have more bars in my back spare room that don't get used yet than most people have in their actual just gym alone. But what you'll find is I will always keep one of every bar. Like, let's say I have a specialty bar that I really don't like and I have 6 to 8 of them because I tend to order quite a few of them. I'll sell all of them but one or two. Even if I don't have them on, most of the time they're on the floor. Sometimes I'll keep one in back, so I always have one that won't get messed with because I never know if there's going to be a new exercise, new movement, something that I find a use for, and maybe it takes me 10, 12, 15 years. I just value specialty bars so much that I will always keep one of every variation I have. Like I said, even if I can't stand the variation, one, there might be someone in my gym who loves that variation. It really helps them out. I don't care if it's one person. It's worth it to me. My job as a coach is to anybody who comes my way, I optimize them as an athlete. And so if I have 200 gym members and only one benefits with that bar, I'm keeping that bar because that is what that athlete needs. But what if I invent an exercise, or what if I start training a different sport, or rules of the sports that I do train athletes change, and next thing you know, that bar that wasn't utilized for many people might be utilized for the majority of people in the gym. But I believe in those bars so much, and I love having so much variation, especially bars that like I said, even the ones I don't like, I keep at least one because you just never know. It's worth it to keep one just because I understand once there's a benefit, because you have to understand the benefit you get from these bars can't be had any other way. So, you could say, well, I got rid of my T-bar because I didn't have much space in my gym, but I do chest down on an incline, or I do seal rows, wide grip with dumbbells. Same thing. Sure, pretty close. You don't necessarily need a T-bar to get your back strong, okay? These specialty bars are a little bit different because they're the only thing that hits the way they hit. Whether it strengthens something, or it allows you to work around an injury, or it points out a weakness, or teaches you technique. Doesn't matter what it is, but there's no denying when they work, when they're what you need, that's the only, you have to have it.
Totally agree. After multi-grip,
Mm-hmm.
what would be the next, what do you feel like? What's the next bar you get?
I mean, I do think a Buffalo bar is probably the most widely used after that, Yeah, I would say a Buffalo bar or a Cambridge. Let's say Cambridge. Let's talk about Cambridge bench bar because I think a Cambridge bench bar has more uses than a bow bar does as far as upper body.
Agreed. If you could find one.
If you can find one, yeah.
Yeah, I think a 2-inch Cambridge bench bar would be the next most valuable, but good luck.
Yeah. So, like Jesse, I think you talked about in the last episode, 2-inch Cambridge bars are hard to find. 4-inch ones are kind of where you're at. So what we do with the 4-inch is we put a 2x4 on the chest, and that turns it into a 2-inch Cambridge bar roughly. Or you can put one of those bench blocks, like a one board bench block on there, and that'll do the same thing for you. What I like about the Cambridge bar is, besides bench press, though, well, I guess we might as well talk about bench press. Sometimes you have these guys who have really short arms, big barrel chests, so they don't have much range of motion. So if we take that bar and give them 2 more inch range of motion, their shoulders are still in a safe position. This allows them to move less weight and get stronger, so they can get deeper in angles and positions for that muscle tissue to get worked in angles and positions they normally don't get to see. But also as well, the bar is traveling a farther distance, and it's going to take longer to press that bar, which means you don't use as much weight. So again, it's a bar that we can keep our nervous system in check because we're not overloading real hard, because it's just a hard bar to utilize. So I really like that one. It helps a lot of people keep their chest up in a bench, because if you drop your chest as that bar is coming down, man, that bar is pretty deep for most people. 2 inches doesn't sound like a lot, but man, it bench with it. You'll see what your bench is with it compared to a straight bar. Trust me, there's a difference. So if you have your chest up and you bring that bar down, it's great. But if your chest is caving as you bring that bar down, that bar gets extremely difficult very fast, and it subconsciously gets people forcing their chest up. So I like that as far as someone self-teaching themselves how to bench, or they're taking something that a coach has already told them. If I'm saying chest up all the time, this is something that bar is giving them the same feedback, just in a different way, right? So I really like that. And then as far as really most of my favorite stuff with a bar is back exercises. Seal rows, I get 4 more inches of range of motion on seal rows, whether I'm narrow or wide grip. I can use that band tension, chain weight, straight weight, doesn't really matter. I like doing shrugs with those because when I step into the bar is right directly to my sides instead of out straight in front of me. So it is a different stimulus than having the bar loaded in front of you. So things like that, I really appreciate and like with that bar.
Yep. Yeah, like I said, yeah, I agree. I think it's really high value. Just the only thing I don't like about that larger camber for benching is you can use the weight of the camber itself to lead you into a better or worse bench position versus the 2-inch camber is so minor that you can't. And I think I said it last episode, the one way that I got around this was we took one of our axle bars, cut the middle section out, and welded in 3/8 flat bar to offset it by 2 inches. So our 2-inch bench camber bar is just an axle we cut apart, which has been great. I mean, I think it's better to do it with an axle because rather than if you even had a bent bar sitting around, because I think welding that 3/8 flat bar to pipe is probably a better bet and a cleaner weld than trying to weld 28 mil bar to 3/8 flat bar. I think but I mean, there's great welders out there who probably do that just fine.
There's also a thing though. Okay, so Jesse welded that to an axle bar. Now we'll get into it in a bit, but I do like axle bars for upper body for like bench press. I've found, and so I'm going to go back to what he's saying. What I like about, so like when you're benching an axle bar, okay, if you have elbow issues, if I open my hands, you can see the articulation change in the musculature of my forearm, right? So going to a wider bar sometimes clears some of that tissue out of the way. I've literally had times where I take a regular straight bar, go to bench, and my elbows are killing me. Switch to an axle bar, 0 pain. Hit a 1 rep max, 0 pain. So of course I'm going to hit the 1 rep max with an axle bar and leave the straight bar alone. I'll work on rehabbing my elbows and getting them feeling better, recovering better. But I don't need to limit my workout for today. I can still hit a true 1 rep max and push it, and that's where I'd use that bar. What I like about Jesse putting a camber to that axle bar is now I have more than one variation when my elbows are hurting. So I could do a straight bar this week. Maybe I do band tension, and the next week I could do chain weight with the 2-inch drop axle. And now I have 2 weeks in a row where that alleviates some pressure on my elbow. So I really like they did it with this. I'm actually going to cut one of mine apart now because I have 8 to 10 axle bars in my gym. So I'm going to cut one of them apart just because of that.
Yeah, we did it a couple, like, I don't know how many, maybe 5-6 years ago. We've had zero issues. We've had people use it for squat as well, just because it's a minor camber. You got that axle thickness. It is different. I would say the axle's the most underrated bar for bench press, because people don't see what the difference would be between a straight bar and an axle. And as soon as you get under axle, I mean, you're not moving the same amount of weight with an axle bar as you are straight bar, because you've really got to be super thoughtful about that bar path and position, because it's just, one, no rotating sleeves, 2, that bar is 2 inches instead of 28 mil, so it doesn't stack as easily like over the long bones of the forearm. So be very thoughtful about that bar path in both directions. I mean, depending on how heavy you lift, it's also very stiff. I love it. I would say to anyone who hasn't done it, it's 100% worth a try before you roll your eyes at doesn't make any difference. Like, yeah, give it a try first. And then
I've had so many people say the same thing, Jesse. They don't think there's any difference. I'm like, no, there's a difference. No, it's a straight bar. How's it different?
Totally.
Your grip is different. Your hand's different. It stacks different. Like you said, just try it. Miyamoto Musashi said, like in the Book of Five Rings, it's like, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. If you get underneath that weight with an axle bar and you press with it, you will feel a difference between that and a regular straight bar.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, that stiffness matters, like that being, it's hard. It makes the lift much harder. You don't get any of the rebounding effect. Even we just redid one of the games workouts, and people were shocked at how hard the deadlift was. They just see the weight and they're like, oh, I can deadlift that weight easy. And at that axle bar, it's like you're not getting the same bounce off the ground. It's it hits heavier. You don't get the rebound. Like, it's a different stimulus. And again, that's kind of the whole point with these specialty bars is, the broader the physiological stimulus, the broader the physiological adaptation.
I think that's the next T-shirt for Conjugate there, Chris. That stiffness matters.
Yeah, cutting that clip out straight to Instagram. Multi-grip to bow to cambers to axle. Anything at, like, what else we got? I mean, bamboo obviously for rehab. Yeah,
rehab finisher,
rehab.
Not really yeah.
We did do maxes with them before. I don't know if I saw a direct translation to anything with that. I would prefer to do reps with it anyway, just because I love the blood flow from it. The stabilization as you fatigue. The fatigue teaches you a lot. Teaches you about yourself, teaches you to struggle longer, and it lets you know what happens when you start to lose that struggle too, right? You start to see your technique go south. Everybody knows that, but until you have an apparatus that reacts instantly to that, sometimes people don't realize how much. I think people get fatigued and they let themselves go. Like, you'll see fighters start to drop their hands because they think they can get away with it until they get knocked out. But that bar gets instant feedback. The second you relax anywhere, it starts moving more and more. So I really love that bar for reps. So even though we've done it for a 1-rep max before, like I said, I don't know if there was a carryover to it, but there is definitely a carryover to technique and to rehab when you're talking about reps,
Generally,
do you use Tsunami for the bench, Jesse?
I actually have played with it only a little bit and have it in my mind to give it more of a try, just because that, like, I've got pretty good at the bamboo bar. So we'll use it for like 3 sets of 20. But there is a groove to it. And once you can feel that groove, like, you can kind of work the band tension and the loading and keep it in check. And so the Tsunami I'd like to play with more because, I mean, definitely with the squat, you're like, it's just everywhere. And so the question would be, like, is that also true with the bench press? I know Corey actually has done it more than I have. And he's enjoyed it quite a bit. But I think their bars are worth having. I mean, 3 sets of 20 on the bamboo or earthquake bar or whatever they're calling it now is like great. I mean, there's no loss of, like, that's a great way to spend some time. The other side too with bench is past specialty bars. You also had to remember you've got things like pin press, pin paused, boards. Like, those pieces are a great easy adds. I mean, there's no cost to screwing a couple of 2x4s or 2x6s together and then changing that range of motion, especially as like a secondary piece, like boards. How often would you guys max boards?
For us, okay, I'm going to go through something I've been doing a little different with athletes. Okay. And I've been doing this for a while, but we mainly use boards for tricep work, right? Like, so if I bench, I limit, like, I do 3 or 4 boards. So my arms are roughly parallel or slightly above parallel, and I can work rep schemes with chain, band tension, reverse band, whatever. Going off of a board off our chest on a max, we used to not do that frequently, just something that kind of randomly thrown in once in a while. Now what I do is I do every 3rd week is something that does not touch chest. So whether it's a dead press, pin press, floor press, board press, that is something I do every 3rd week, because when you look at it, if I can shorten that range of motion every 3 weeks over a 10-year, 15-year career, that is a lot less wear and tear on that joint. and I am seeing the bench go up. I feel even faster because I think the shoulders are even healthier and less wear and less fatigue on them. And people's lockouts are getting better, because they're handling a little more weight. So I have only seen it be a positive to the bench, but I'm also not. If someone has a slight impingement or don't have exactly enough range in their joint, but the bench is the weight's forcing them down and they're going through it, it's going to irritate the shoulders. Eventually, going to be a problem. So, giving that every 3 weeks, giving that a break seems to be a big deal. The one thing I want to caution people about, though, is that when you put a board on your chest, especially if you're going to 2 board on up, if I do a 1 board, I do a 1 rep max just because I count it as giving the athlete a little bit of a break that week. But if I was going to 2 board on up, I'm doing a 2 rep max. Okay, I'm not doing a 1 rep max. For years I'd go to powerlifting meets, and it's funny because I feel bad because at first I thought a lot of your high level powerlifters had ego issues, right? Because they would go to a meet, get ticked, they missed a weight, and they're going, man, that guy just went for 850, but he could have been 725 today. He's not an 850 bencher. And he's mad, and it's like, God, I've seen this guy 3 meets in a row now, and he's missed 850 every time. Like, why doesn't he cut his weight back? So then I go up, talk to the guy, and well, I hit 885 to a 2 board, last week, 2 weeks before the meet. 850 shouldn't have been a problem. Why didn't I lock that out? Because he locked out more 2 weeks ago. It's pretty simple. If you take that 2 board off the chest and put it at the top, that's how far he missed away, because he taught his body to strain for that amount of time. Okay? So that's where he ended. Now, if I take a 2 board and I do a double with it, so let's say maybe he hit 810, 820 for a double, he could do 810, 820 off his chest because he'd strained long enough to complete the benching competition. With the 2 board doing 1 rep or a 3 board doing 1 rep, he's not straining long enough for it to transfer to sport in the sport of bench. Okay, so just keep that in mind when you guys are using boards.
I love that. I like both those pieces. I like cycling that in every bunch of weeks for a range of motion change. And that definitely is important to know. It's like, you don't want to confuse. It's like people, limiting the range on like your mornings. Mm-hmm. We're like, hey, that's fine as long as you're aware that your range is limited. But don't start thinking, your good morning's 405 when you're going through a very limited range. And I think with the bench you definitely can end up with that feeling of like, yeah, if you're not getting enough time under tension or enough strain, that will not translate mm-hmm. from 2, especially 2 board is 3 inches. It's mm-hmm. a lot of range depending on the size of the athlete.
And this is what I want you guys to think about too. These people I'm talking about, they were knowledgeable, world-class powerlifters, people who are close to world records or trying for world records. These people are pros. They weren't amateurs. It's just, that's the difference of the more you know as a coach. It's like learning 1% is a big deal at the top 1%, is that it's sink or swim. People always go, oh yeah, but you only got the athlete 1% farther. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, no one else could. If you don't think that last 1% is important, pretty simple. I'm going to have you jump off a boat, swim a mile to shore. If you're 1% shy of making it to shore, tell me how much that 1% meant. It's literally sink or swim. It's the death of you as a person, or it's the death of you as an athlete. Like, trust me, you want that last 1%. The last 1% is what really matters, right? Some of these athletes could have been world record holders who weren't, or could have broke more world records or took the numbers up higher if they understood how to utilize that technology of those boards. Okay. So that piece is huge, but don't feel bad if you're making that mistake, because 99% of pros make that mistake. We do have a freak bar, but nobody probably even knows what it is.
Do you have one of those?
Oh, I have one. I have an original one in my back. I keep it in the back storage room.
Yeah.
And I only bring it out for people I want to bring it out for, because nobody's touching that bar.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, how many is there?
It slides outwards as you press, right?
Yeah, you can press in or press out. It really teaches that spreading the bar. I lived on that bar for a little while because I was having some shoulder issues, and it allowed me to work around it. That bar taught me how to bench, because before I felt like I was pulling the bar apart, and I could feel the pressure. But then my bench, at one point, when I knew I had a good bench, when I knew I could bench, it never felt like I was pressing up. I just felt like I touched my chest, and I felt like I spread the bar until my arms lock. And obviously, I'm not sliding my hands in the bar, but so it's going up, right? But I never thought about press. I just kept pull apart, pull apart, pull apart, pull apart. Boom, and it would lock. That's when my bench was at its best. It felt like the range was shorter. I felt tighter. I activated my triceps quicker. Like that was the game changer. That bar right there. It was a lot of fun.
Did they even sell that bar?
They did for a short time, but I can't remember who they had make it. The one they had make it, the springs were too light on it, so it was kind of too easy going in and out. The original one from Westside is thick springs on both sides. Like you have to get into it, man. Like you got to manhandle that bar. But I really like that bar. You can do like Louis push-ups and push it forward or push it out when you're coming up for high reps and stuff like that. So like something I like to do is like I would do that exercise and I would pick either a back exercise, or if I want to work on my chest, I could do like flies or something. And I go like 20 down to 2. So 20, 20, 18, 18, 16, 16, drop by 2 all the way down to 2. And like use that as a finisher and talk about like if I'm pulling that bar apart and hitting some like rear delt stuff, man, my rear delts and my shoulders are blowing up. If I push that bar in, my chest is getting blown up. So it's just a fun bar, something different,
Yeah, totally.
So,
Difference between board press, pin paused. Like, do you guys do a fair bit of like pin press and pin pause, or is it similar to board, like pretty infrequently?
So like I said, the board is infrequently because of this. Because once every 3 weeks, we stay off the chest. So we will use a board. We will do a dead press, which is starting in the bottom position of a power rack and is pressing up. That is my favorite one. The reason why it is my favorite one is because most people don't understand that you're not pressing the bar away from yourself. You're wedging between the bar and the bench. So you should be trying to push your back through the bench. Obviously, the bench isn't going to move, so your back's not going to go through it. But if you want to stack your shoulders perfectly and have your shoulders healthy and safe and have a really high level bench, that's the way to do it. The dead press lets someone feel what they're supposed to feel like during bench, and then when you're benching, you can search for that feeling, okay? So we have dead press, we have board presses. Pin pressing is when you take it from the top, you lower it onto the pins in reverse. So you can do that touch and go, or you can do a pause like Jesse was talking about. All those variations are valid. And then there's a floor press variation. Why I like the floor press is some people, their low back start to irritate them after a while because they arch real hard and they drive real hard with their legs. And some people, their backs are irritated in that. So in a floor press, having our feet flat on the ground, our legs straight out in front of us, takes that pressure off the low back because we're not driving in the ground with our legs below us and pressing up. So the floor press obviously is when your triceps touch the ground and you press back up. They all offer something different, which I really like. And I do, no matter what, like to pause, even if it's briefly on a pin press. And then the dead press, pausing on a pin press, pausing on a board, pausing on a floor press, all offer you the same benefit of a box squat in the sense that you're breaking up the eccentric concentric phase. So since 90% of your soft tissue injuries happen during the reversal phase of the lift, we're eliminating that reversal phase. And what I mean by that is, think about an Olympic lifter. When they catch a clean, they come down and they come up and they can't make that clean. They bounce 2 or 3 times and they stand all the way up. They didn't get stronger by bouncing 2 or 3 times. They stored enough kinetic energy in their tendons to allow them to get up to a leverage point where they could finally stand up from it, okay? That is a stretch reflex. That is using your soft tissue to reverse direction, which is one way to create speed, but it's also the most dangerous way, okay? So the other way is static overcome by dynamic, and that is a sprinter in the starting blocks. It's the first step coming out of the starting blocks. That's using your muscle to create the velocity. A great athlete is good at both, okay? But we want to live more in the static overcome by dynamic than the other way because you live longer as an athlete. You're in your sport longer. So
that's why we do speed work too, right? Since we do the speed work with lighter weights, so you can work those in safer positions or safer.
100%.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's exactly why we do it. So this, again, allows you to live longer in sport because you're, one, working the quality of static overcome by dynamic. So think of what is static overcome by dynamic? Well, if you're at the CrossFit Games and one of your events is you're starting on a big tire, flipping a tire so many times until you go to the next movement, that first tire flip, is static overcome by dynamic. You don't have a load on you or coming down and reversing that lift. So, that is a very good thing to be good at, but it is the longevity that I really care about. So if I can once every 3 weeks limit range and pause it, so I break up the eccentric concentric phase, we're going to live substantially longer as an athlete. Okay, so that's kind of how we view those. Again, take all those movements we just talked about, every straight bar, every specialty bar we talked about, straight weight, reverse band, band to the bottom, chain and band combination are all available to us. That is a lot of variations. Now, talk about max, right? Well, if we're talking about max for upper body, close grip bench, medium grip bench, wide grip bench, overhead. So once we start talking about strict press, push jerks with different specialty bars like log, axle, straight bar, chain, band, reverse band, we have a lot of different variations available, so, you're really, limited by your imagination with those things.
Yeah, I would say the boards, we're going to see that maybe one time a year. Sometimes I just like it in as a variation. It is nice. I mean, people focus too much on like the loading of it. I always like the positional awareness of when you change your range of motion. So even though the range is shorter, you have to be more positionally aware. Floor press, I think the pause is critical because you've changed that range. The floor press pause kind of makes up for what the range is limited. But I like floor press because it teaches the athlete symmetry, side to side, shoulder to shoulder, makes them aware if they're coming in uneven, tension in control at the bottom. And then also positional awareness of just being able to can you get your triceps to touch the floor equally, evenly, pause in control, but maintain tension, and then press back through. I think pin press is similar, or dead press, as you're saying, for that positional awareness at the bottom. The athlete who wins the pin press is often, or that dead press is the athlete who can set themselves up, wedge themselves in incredibly tight, have the bar in the proper position for the position it is between the chest touch and lockout, and be able to successfully press. Because often you see those athletes miss, and all that bar does is slide back and forth along the safety pins or the spotter's arms. And you're like, yeah, it's just not the right position, or you didn't press in the right direction. And then pin pause kind of puts that together for being able to come down, get that equal symmetry of the bar touches the safety pins or spotter's arms at the same time. You can hold tension there. You don't get that sink into the chest that you can still have some athletes work on a board press. And then you've got that really static starting strength out of the hole.
So what Jesse said, extremely important. One way to think about one of those, just just a little different way, because everybody learns in a different way. So this is same thing Jesse said, but another kind of way to look at it. If I see that bar leave a half inch, and it shift back, forward, left, right, my athlete's not set up perfect. If they're set up perfect, they'll lose them perfect. The bar comes straight up 1 inch and it comes straight back down to the exact place it started. Now we know the person knows how to set up, they wedge them properly, and they have the proper touch point. So it is an indicator as a coach for me to tell if the athlete is doing that movement, wrong or not. Okay. So, that position's huge, that Jesse was talking about. The starting strength position part of it is phenomenal. I will do it to a 1 rep max, but we also do a lot of these things also to a 2 rep, just so we have to make sure it carries over in time. It just depends on what I'm kind of work, but either one is fine for a max. But exactly what Jesse said is right. It gives us opportunities to see who knows what they're doing and who still needs work on some positional stuff.
Yeah, that's a great, we've used the 2 board. We don't really use the 1 board. With 2 boards we've used quite a bit. And some of it's because a lot of our lifters are really getting stuck at that mid range, which is common for the bench press, right? But to your point, Jesse, that you brought up, one of the reasons I really like it is that, my lifter, the class, especially the, not talking about competitive athlete here, but the people in my class, the bar path is still a major issue, and people realize really quick that their bar path is off very fast from the top to that middle of the board, where you can see everything's up by your delts, which means if you're doing it here, you're doing it on your regular bench press, you just shift into that position as you get close to the chest because you know where you're supposed to hit. So that can be, and I think the 2 rep gives you more time under tension. I didn't really put that together. That's an awesome point. And I think for the positional purposes, if that's what you're using it for, it gives more time under tension to feel that position as well.
Well, Chris, think about, we look at power, the equation for power, right? And CrossFit talked about that. That was one of the nice things about CrossFit is when Glassman came up with CrossFit and started educating people, he started using mathematical equations to teach people how to lift, which is exactly what we do at Westside Barbell. So we started to put that in play when we're talking about using our boards and things like that, because, well, people know what the equation is and they know that it's real. A lot of times they don't know how to apply it in actual movements of each day when they're training. And that is just one of the ways that you can apply it. And once you realize that, you start looking at other things that you do and using it to apply the same way.
Yeah, and you talk about the speed squats with like the sprinter, the wide receiver, that three lifts in 6-7 seconds, which is what a play is like. But from that max effort, hadn't heard it explained that way. That's cool.
Shane, I know you're tight for time.
Cool.
That's pretty solid. We can wrap it there. Okay, finish out. So, if you made it this far, thanks for listening. If you have questions, post 2 comments on YouTube. We'll do our best to get to them or potentially even bring them up on subsequent episodes. Thank you, and good afternoon or good day. Let me pause it.
Conjugate Nation Podcast.